The Southwest Center for Pediatric Environmental Health is one of 10 pediatric environmental health specialty units, also known as PACUs in the United States. The purpose of the PACU program is to serve as a leading national source of medical information and consultative advice on environmental conditions that influence human health through reproduction and pediatric development. To serve as part of our mission, we offer this Grand Round series once a month. Today we have Dr. Lowry joining us discussing case studies from the Southwest Center for Pediatric Environmental Health. Before I introduce him, I want to just share a few pieces of information with you. All of our attendees will be muted and will not be able to unmute themselves. However, if you have any comments or questions, you can use the chat function, and we will be sure to get to those at the end of the session. I also need to acknowledge the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, and the Public Health Institute. Without these organizations, the work of the PACU would not exist. We are also providing both continuing medical education hours as well as continuing nursing education hours. Please scan this QR code so you can get the appropriate continuing education that you need. And if you are asked about an activity code, it is 4121. As you can see right here on the screen, 4121. This is our disclosure for those that are requesting nursing education hours. And just to let you all know that our next grand rounds will be on Thursday, August 21st. And we will be discussing pediatric environmental health and community participation with Dr. Filippo. I also want to remind you all that we provide various different trainings for both community as well as health professional. Two trainings that I'd like to highlight today is our work with pesticide use and with childhood cancer. If you are interested in receiving information on those trainings or on any others, please email us, which we'll put our email in the chat, and we can provide you with further information on that. So without further ado, I'm pleased to be joined today by Dr. Larry Lowry. Dr. Lowry has a BS degree in chemistry from San Jose State University and a PhD in comparative biochemistry from the University of California at Davis. Dr. Lowry conducted human nutrition research with the U.S. Army and served as the Chief of Biological Monitoring at the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health. In 1996, he joined the faculty at the University of Texas Health Sciences Center at Tyler, and he was the founding professor in the School of Community and Rural Health. In 2000, he became the director for the Southwest Center for Pediatric Environmental Health. And in 2017, Dr. Lowry received an Outstanding Teaching Award from the University of Texas System. In 2021, he was appointed as the new School of Medicine as part of the University of Texas realignment. And in 2024, he retired from the university. Dr. Lowry has served on several national and international committees. He was the founding member of and chair of the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists, Biological Exposure Indices Committee, a committee that develops biomarker guidelines for safe levels of exposure for adults in working environments. His current activities as a retired professor emeritus include educating medical students about occupational and environmental health. We are so happy to have Dr. Lowry with us today and to have him as our founding father, if you will, of the Southwest Center for Pediatric Environmental Health. He's always been a wonderful resource, and I'm excited to hear about case studies that he'll be presenting today. Dr. Lowry?
Okay. Well, I'm happy to be here, and it's been an interesting ride from the beginning of this organization to where it is right now. And it takes a lot of people working and being very dedicated to the activity, including those that are currently here. The Pediatric Center, just to elaborate just a little bit on Dr. Monk's, we do not receive sufficient funding generally to go out and physically intervene in some of these cases. So these cases are basically based on phone conversations that we've had with providers and parents that call in. We try to avoid taking calls from attorneys if possible. So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about some case studies. My mentor, Dr. Jeff Levine, sometimes refers to these as vignettes rather than case studies because they are abbreviated. We'll talk about mercury exposure in a family of 7, some take-home exposure to lead, carbon monoxide exposure in a school, another situation where mercury was in a school, and then an unusual lead exposure case. And then to bring things into, and most of these are 10 years old or more from in the past history type of thing. To bring things up currently, I have a new faculty member that helped me put together a session, a brief session on wildfire exposure and its risks to children. So, mercury exposure in a family of 7. In 1099, a family of 7 people moved into a trailer. A plastic container of metallic mercury was found. The mercury was spilled on the carpet. The family did not realize that the trailer was contaminated. Now, of course, at the time the call came in, nobody knew anything about mercury. We found that out as we investigated this thing. So the index case was a 3-year-old female. She was seen by a local physician several times between December 99 and June 2000 with flu-like symptoms, screaming, anorexia, weight loss, and inability to talk. Can you imagine in today's world it's taking 6 months to try to figure out what's going on? This was a Hispanic family. There could have been communication difficulties. She was finally hospitalized in June of 2000. The index case, again, thin, ataxic, not speaking, drooling, hypotonic, tremor, no rash or gum swelling. The initial impression upon her admission was a brain tumor. They did ask about other family members. None were reported to be symptomatic, but none were examined by a doctor. Well, here's some of the labs and diagnostic tests that were run at the hospital. The CT of the brain, MRI, EEG, ultrasound, GI series, CBC, chem panel, urinalysis, etc. Blood, urine, and spinal cultures, blood heavy metals. Do you think they had any idea what was going on? This looks like a spattering of everything, of testing that should cover all possibilities. They did blood and urine spinal cultures and heavy metals. All tests were normal except blood mercury, which was 295 micrograms per deciliter. We generally recognize that a normal level is less than 3. We have no idea what amount represents a hazard. A 24-hour urine was 1,097 micrograms per day. Normal is less than 15. It's not so easy to collect a 24-hour urine in a 3-year-old child. Fortunately, the hospitalization was in Dallas, and medical toxicologist from the poison center came in and looked at the patient and said, pink disease. So what happened after that? Well, I looked at urine mercury from family members. They ordered a DMSA chelation for all. In July, the index case was discharged. The condition had improved. In August, a second round of chelation, all family members on an outpatient basis. Later in that month, the second round of urine collections, and then in October, a third round of urine collections. Well, here's some of the urine data in terms of micrograms per day. The 3-year-old index case female dropped dramatically following the chelation. The 6-year-old male was also very high, and as these were voluntary types of things, we don't have specimens from everyone at every collection period. The 7-year-old female, 9-year-old male, 16-year-old female, and probably the mother and the child. So everybody had significant elevations of mercury. Let me go back a minute. A little bit of follow-up. The Texas Department of State Health Services, I believe, got involved, and the people were moved out of the trailer. There was an attempt to clean up the trailer, and the people moved back in. And after the trailer had been cleaned up and ventilated, and we have not heard anything further on that. I am assuming that the health conditions improved on the people. The next case was a take-home exposure to lead. Here's a 17-month-old girl in a rural North Texas community, had an elevated blood lead at 34 micrograms per deciliter. The call came to the pediatric center from the grandmother of this girl. And she reported the grandchild had a 34 microgram per deciliter blood lead. And her dad had an elevation of 46 micrograms per deciliter. Dad worked in a trophy plant, a trophy and trinket plant, 11 employees. We'll find out a little bit more about this plant later. So the question here, how come the dad was high and the grandchild was high? Was it take-home exposure? Was it exposure around the home? Where did it come from? Well, our pediatrician from the pediatric center called the grandmother and she got more information. The pediatrician wrote letters to the following requesting action: to local North Texas Health Department, State Health Department, OSHA, and EPA. The focus of the letter was not bitching and moaning and complaining, but concern for other children of parents that worked in the same location. The North Texas, there was no health department, regional health department in the area where this event took place. So the state health did some of this. So the initial blood was 34, as I reported earlier. This picture of the child. Venous blood follow-ups over 5 months were 18, 27, and 33. They didn't really drop. Now, no chelation was done here. So family history, father works at a trophy factory. Mother works in a nursing home. Grandmother lives at home, but she also works at the trophy factory. So you keep talking about the trophy factory. What about the home? Well, they did XRF readings in the home on the paint, and they were negative. They looked at dust wipes on the carpet, and they were positive, 82 micrograms per square foot in the kitchen, 44 in the bedroom. Dust wipes of father's clothes were positive. The shirt was really loaded, almost 28,000 micrograms per square foot, and the pants were near 4,000 micrograms per square foot. Dust wipes of the car seats were positive. The driver's seat was 78 micrograms per square foot, and the passenger seat was 99 micrograms per square foot. Why would the passenger seat, the driver's seat, if the father had lead on his clothing, you might expect some in the driver's seat. What about the passenger seat? What did we say about Grandma? She worked at the factory also, so she was the passenger. Here's the culprit. There is a small figurine underneath here. XRF's made by the figurine at the father, and there are 56 parts per million, 51 parts per million on two different devices that they looked at. So we found the source of lead. Wait a minute, let me go back here. And so what happened? Well, OSHA came in and they fined the company. The company's response was not to pay the fine, but to do away with using lead to make their trinkets. And to my knowledge, other members of the family and other members of the workforce there at the trophy plant were not tested. They could have been, but we did not have any results on that. So the issue here is don't assume what the source is until you've investigated it. And this will come up again as it was in the previous case. So here is, and I probably shouldn't call this carbon monoxide exposure in a school because I give away the toxic agent. So just to ignore that for a minute. The situation, teachers and students reported headaches about 2:30 in the afternoon. The headaches disappeared when they went away from school. What happens at 2:30? They checked, they suspected carbon monoxide as an exposure. They checked out the furnace. Actually, it was an HVAC system because it was in the summertime, and it was okay. There was no carbon monoxide leaking from it. But the time of incident is a clue. Air intake of the traffic circle. Here's the school. This isn't the actual school. I didn't have a picture of it. This is a school from Google. The air intake, there's a traffic circle in the front, and the air intake for the HVAC system was right by the traffic circle. And this is typically what you have, school buses and parents waiting in this traffic circle. Summertime, air conditioning on, engines running. Probably the wintertime would be the same, only the air conditioning wouldn't be on, the heater would be on. So that was the source of carbon monoxide. So what was done? Well, school was dismissed. Many were transported to the emergency department. Most who had arrived at the emergency department had an elevated carboxyhemoglobin. They had all recovered by the next morning. So it's the solutions, and this is kind of a general comment to make. Solutions can be two kinds. One, the better, the high cost, the gold standard, fix the source of the problem. That can be very expensive. But in this case, a simple low cost solution was move the pickup area away from the area intake. You're certainly not going to get the employees or the parents to turn off their air conditioning in their automobiles. So that would be the solution. So I don't know what was done, but I would assume the simplest pattern was done. Simplest solution was done. So what are we doing with mercury in a church school? What does mercury have to do with religion? Don't have an answer for that. Well, here's the situation. The parent of a baby called on a Monday and related that the church secretary's 11-year-old son was ill. So the church's secretary took the child to school or to work with her last week. Mom sent the son to the education wing to amuse himself because the son was bugging her mom, and mom had things to do. So what did the 11-year-old boy do in the education wing? He found the mercury containing thermostats in the picture. He went to he removed them from five of the six classrooms. He took the thermostats to the baby room, disassembled them, and played with mercury. Well, you've all seen mercury. It's unlike anything you've ever seen before. And I have to say, as a child, I had my playtime with mercury. I used to convert pennies into dimes by coating them with mercury. So what happens next? Well, the problem was noticed on Sunday morning when the air conditioning did not work. And we found out the boy spilled the mercury on the carpet, and he cleaned up with a small hand vac. And most of you know that you do not clean up a liquid mercury that has a high vapor pressure with a vacuum cleaner. You just spread around more of it. This is important. There were no reported health effects. But here's the situation. Are we talking a chronic exposure and acute exposure? It's a short-term exposure. So that makes a difference. Well, we were very, very fortunate because the parent who called was a pharmacist. Hey, pharmacists know all about toxicology and dose response and ADME and all those things. So she called the EPA on a Monday morning. They sent out a team to investigate it that same day. EPA doesn't usually respond quite so actively, but the possibility of a mercury exposure in a church school and perhaps numerous children impacted. They came out. They surveyed the area with a mercury sniffer. They found mercury in 2 of the classrooms. They found a hot spot in the baby room. They recommended removal of carpet in all the classrooms and a full cleanup, the so-called gold standard rule. Why do the other classrooms when the mercury was not found in them? And what is the cost to do all of that? Well, I recommended they clean up the hot spots with flowers of sulfur, which converts the mercury to mercury sulfide, a black powder. That can be cleaned up much easier than the liquid mercury. I recommended they remove the carpet in the 2 rooms. They use a mercury spill kit for any visible mercury, and to wet mop the floors, which were concrete, particularly after the carpet was removed, and ventilate all the rooms with airflow and windows open. I strongly recommended not testing the children for urine mercury because you're opening Pandora's box if you do that. You're going to find mercury in children's urine. It may come from dietary sources. It may come from other sources. It's not necessarily mercury from the classroom. And the children were asymptomatic. Don't open Pandora's box. Don't open that. Don't generate data that you can't explain to people. So the follow-up to that, the pastor called pediatric center and thanked us for help. And he said, and we volunteered to attend a meeting at the church. It was about a 2-hour drive from that, and we would be willing to do that on our own and address the community, the church community, about the issues. He said, no, everything was under control and it was handled properly. Can you imagine if they had gone in and tested urine mercury on everybody and reported it to everyone? You would have had all those parishioners all excited about their poor child who had mercury poisoning. And so, into the story. Keep it simple, and don't confuse the situation with too much data. Here was an unexplained exposure to lead in a Hispanic child. This is a referral that came from the Texas Department of State Health Services. Through the reporting systems, an 11-month-old child with a history of elevated blood leads over a 4-month period in the range of 36 to 41 micrograms per deciliter. The data was reported by the child's pediatrician. Now, what do we know about the child? Well, the child was breastfed exclusively for 6 months. Initial blood levels was elevated at 6 months. I think there's a 6-month requirement for blood lead testing in children in Texas. So the child began solid foods at 6 months, but continued to breastfeed. The child had mild anemia, otherwise normal growth and development. There was no apparent source of lead based on discussion with the mom. The child was born on August of 2001. He was first tested in March of 2002. That doesn't make sense. Okay. At 41 micrograms. Repeated testing on a week later at 36. He was given oral chelation with Succimer on April. The lead test number 3 at the end of April was 40. Didn't drop. The Texas Department of State Health Services sent out an inspector in May to look around for sources of lead. We'll talk about that in a minute. They did repeat testing in June. It was still 37. They tested the mom, and mom had an elevated blood lead. All other family members were negative for blood lead. The child did not respond to Succimer. The elevated blood leads were still there. That must mean that there was lead exposure continuing. Where was it coming from? Well, the first visit by the hygienist from Texas Department of State Health Services, they found no sources of lead in the home or outside. The paint, floors, surfaces, the dirt outside, mini blinds, all negative. The family lived in a mobile home that was immaculately clean. We did a further evaluation of our center. We sent someone out to the site because it was reasonably close. We used some of these lead check tests kits, the little swab that you can rub on a surface and see if there's lead. We looked at toys, cribs, tubs, foods, pots, cosmetics, ceramics, imported foods and candies, keychains, herbal remedies, folk remedies, lead fishing line sinkers, etc. We didn't find anything. Guess what we found in the backyard? Piece of broken pottery. And it was positive for lead. Aha, a source of lead. How did that pottery get there? What was it before it was broken? Well, it was from a pot that was cooked, a bean pot. And beans were cooked in this lead glazed pottery during pregnancy until a child was 6 months old. With that 6-month lead check, they discontinued cooking beans in the pot. The diet of breast milk only for 6 months, both breast milk and baby foods until about a year. Then table foods. They used bottled water only. The mobile home was clean. There was no lead paint. There was PVC plumbing, city water, no pets, no pacifier, jewelry was negative. No specific cultural exposures were identified, and there was no use of Greta and Ajakon. So where is the lead coming from? It is in the mother and in the child, but not in other members of the family. That probably eliminates the pot as a source of lead because they destroyed the pot at 6 months, and the child continued to have elevated blood lead. So the conclusion was it came from pica behavior of the mom during the first 6 months. And the evidence points that the infant had breast milk only in the first 6 months. The lead elevation could not have come from the bean pot because the child was not consuming anything from the bean pot. The cooking in the bean pot would result in elevated blood lead in all the family, and it was only found in the mom and the infant. So could it have come from the pica behavior of mom? Well, we were fortunate. We had a occupational medicine physician with us who lived, spent much of his life in El Paso. And so he was very bilingual, very bicultural. And he sat down with the mom and had a nice mother to doctor chat. And the mother admitted to the pica behavior. So that was the source of the lead. We also did some other testing. We did some plotting of blood lead levels, and this was really the source. So the take-home message here is an environmental questionnaire is essential. Possible sources of lead or other substance must be investigated and tested. Do not neglect cultural issues. Keep an open mind on how many times do you go in and check something with a conclusion in mind as to we're going to prove it. By doing that, you block out other possible sources. And of course, it's not only in the paint. I'll add a little side note right here. Dr. Monks indicated that I'm working in a school of medicine, and as a volunteer at this point, I've retired 4 times, and I'm still working, and I'm 86, and I continue terrorizing students. But my role is we have a class is called Public Health and System Science. And through the innovation of Dr. Jeff Levine, a occupational medicine physician, we have a program where we are teaching medical students about environmental health and occupational health in terms of how that can impact children. I have a case study, it's case-based learning. I have a case study that involves an individual who is stripping an antique chest of drawers of paint using methylene chloride as a paint stripper. And he goes to see his doctor at his wife's insistence the next day, and he's feeling a little woozy. What do you do? Well, here's a situation where the students don't have any idea what methylene chloride is, and they have to figure out what was going on. The fact that it's metabolized to carbon monoxide, it produces cardiovascular effects in addition to neurological effects, etc. The fun thing is we take the students out in a field study. And I take a group of students to a sawmill. And the students complained, what am I going to a sawmill for? And I asked them, what is a sawmill? It's a workplace. Oh, what is a hospital? It's a workplace. Oh, do you think it might be important to know whether your patient worked in a sawmill or a hospital? Because obviously the risks are very different. So I've been having fun with that. So let me continue on with the presentation as per order here. Wildfires are a growing concern. I understand you had a webinar last month about wildfires, and I'm sorry I missed it. I was out of town. But this was put together by Jessica Sexton, an individual who came to our program. She was born in the Northeast, but spent most of her adult career in Australia, where she has experienced brush fires in addition to the wildfires that have occurred in the U.S. So they seem to be associated with climate change. There are those that would argue against that, but my answer to that is, okay, what other explanation do you have? And anyhow, increasing longevity and frequency and severity, which can lengthen exposures and increase health impacts. There's an article I read today that wildfire smoke is almost a 12-month experience. We have the wildfires in Canada that, depending on which way the wind blows, can get the Pacific Northwest. We've even had smoke down in Texas from those wildfires. In June, last June, I was up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and on one day the smoke was very thick. It was unhealthy. So we know from hospital admissions and emergency room visits that wildfires can be detrimental to human health through the inhalation of smoke, which can release large quantities of pollutants like carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, and particulate matter. And we know that the PM 2.5 particulate matter is very small, and it can goes down into the deep of the lung, into the alveolar area of the lungs and get into the bloodstream. What many don't understand is that volatile organic substances, meaning other substances besides wood that burn in a wildfire, they can be adsorbed onto these PM 2.5 particles. And those toxic substances can then be carried down into the lung. So we're dealing with carbon monoxide as a primary point, but it could be other things going on. Well, what's the impact on pediatric environmental health? Well, asthma is the most common respiratory disease in children, with significant costs associated with care utilization, morbidity, and mortality. We talk about triggers of asthma exacerbation. They include respiratory irritants. Oh yeah, what is wildfire smoke? Air pollution is a known source of triggers for asthma exacerbation. There's all sorts of data, mostly from the Los Angeles area, that during air pollution alerts, the number of visits to emergency departments it goes up quite a bit. The small particulate material has been associated with respiratory morbidity, mortality, and associated burdens in public health. So we know that exposure causes adverse respiratory symptoms like difficulty breathing, wheezing, asthma exacerbation, dry or wet cough, upper and lower respiratory infections, nose, eye, and throat infections, and poor pulmonary function test scores. Here's some of the evidence on recent wildfires and bushes from Canada in 2010 to 2021, an increase in asthma exacerbations. In Australia in 2019 to 2020, PM 2.5 resulted in increased decreased forced vital capacity and lung function testing. In Australia, adults had more respiratory problems. In the US, in 2012, 2015, ambient wildfire smoke influenced clinical outcomes and even diagnostic test results. And there were a number of systematic reviews showing the associated increase in the use of reliever medications associated with adverse respiratory effects and increase in adverse birth outcomes. Well, let's talk about this California case study. Now, let me start out in the beginning here by saying case studies like this are rarely published. I am sure many of you providers have case studies that you have seen that should be published, but do you take the time, or do you have the time to publish those? So a lot of these case studies are not published. There are some systematic studies that are published that have somehow received some form of external funding to make those happen. But in terms of a case study, these are rarely published. So this was a news report. There was a 23-month-old male Hispanic child. He lived in Pacific Palisades, Los Angeles. Medical history, diagnosed with severe asthma at 18 months, managed with daily inhaled corticosteroids, and as needed albuterol nebulization. Well, what happened? In January 2025, a series of catastrophic wildfires erupted across Southern California, including the Pacific Palisades area. I am sure you have seen pictures of absolute total destruction of that whole community from wildfires. So obviously the people that survived had to get out of there, and they oftentimes left rather quickly. These fires led to widespread destruction, displacing thousands, significantly deteriorating air quality due to smoke and ash. The South Coast Air Quality Management District issued multiple advisory and warning residents of hazardous air conditions. Now I look at this picture, and there's a plane releasing flame retardants. I don't recall hearing anything about what's in those flame retardants or whether they are hazardous or toxic. I would appreciate any of you on this call, on this webinar, if you have any information on that, put it in the chat. I'd really be interested in finding out what that is. There was a report, can you use seawater to, instead of this? Well, what does salt water do to vegetation? It destroys it. So not only do you put out the fire, but you sterilize the area for any future regrowth of salt water, even though it was very rare, very available in the Los Angeles area, was not used. So the clinical presentation on January 11th, 2 days after evacuating their smoke-affected home, the child's parents observed signs of respiratory distress, persistent wheezing, and coughing, and labored breathing. Despite administering his prescribed inhaled medications, his symptoms escalated, prompting consultation with his pediatric pulmonologist. I assume that pediatric pulmonologist was not in Pacific Palisades. Notably, the family's nebulizer was lost during the evacuation, complicating at-home management. I can use this guy's name because this is not this is the name of a director of emergency medicine at Children's Hospital, Los Angeles. This is not a HIPAA violation because it doesn't relate to the student or the student. So that more than, excuse me, 10% of children sought care for respiratory illness, a higher than average on the weekend of the child's attack. So the child was admitted to a pediatric emergency department where he received nebulized bronchodilators and systemic corticosteroids in conditions stabilized over 48 hours, allowing for discharge with a replacement nebulizer and adjusted asthma action plan. Where this family went to live following the loss of their residence is another question. So this is, we have seen just recently in Texas, massive flooding in hill country of Texas that has created a similar type of situation. No wildfire smoke here, but just washing people away and their residents in their place. So how do they handle? In most cases, a lot of these people left in a hurry if they got out at all. And obviously, if they didn't have the time to assemble a nice package of medical supplies and all of that, they ran for their lives. So this happens. So this child case exemplifies the acute impact of wildfire smoke on pediatric asthma. The smoke contains the small particles that get into the alveoli. Children are particularly vulnerable to their developing respiratory symptoms and higher inhalation rates relative to body weight. You pediatricians know all about that. Here's a quote that Dr. Sexton put in. Where there's smoke, there are racial disparities in pediatric asthma emergencies. I would be interested in some of the comments from the participants as to what their experience has been. During wildfire smoke events in California, 70% is a much increase in pediatric exacerbations during emergency department visits. Children from socioeconomic disadvantaged backgrounds faced higher risk, emphasizing the needs for targeted public health interventions. I believe Pacific Palisades was primarily a white neighborhood. There was another neighborhood, I've forgotten the name of it, in Los Angeles. There was predominantly black and suffered similar backgrounds. I am assuming that based on this comment here, that the number of emergency visits were higher on a percentage basis in that black community than it was in this community. These are some of the references that were used for this review. Some of the systematic reviews were there. And at this point, wait a minute. A special thanks to Jessica Sexton for her contribute to this wildfire case. And some important contacts. This should be the same contact we had for the very beginning. It should contact the current Poison Center. The Poison Center helpline is nationwide. It rolls over. In Texas, there are 6 poison centers. It rolls over to the nearest one or the nearest one that's available. If any of you have questions or have a case you'd like to chat about, I'd be happy to talk with you. This is my email at the health center. I still maintain a office and a email account at the Health Science Center in Tyler, and but I'm rarely at the office. But I would enjoy talking or chatting with you about anything related to this presentation or any other questions that you might have. At this point, I am through.
Thank you, Dr. Lowry, for that presentation and for the wealth of knowledge that you bring to pediatric environmental health. I am looking in the chat right now to see if there are any specific comment or questions.
I see many thank yous. I have not seen a question or comment yet other than the thank yous.
I do see a posting a tox profile for flame retardants, which includes several chemicals. There's a link there to an ATSTR tox profile. Thank you very much, Dr. Powden.
Yes, Dr. Padden is with the ATSDR, so thank you for that information.
Oh, good.
And then,
Well, we thank you for sharing that. And the chat did have a question that came in here regarding the pica behavior from the lead case. This is the first time I hear from an adult, the mother. In your experience, is this common?
I haven't seen reports of pica activity and blood leads in moms, but I'm sure it's out there. It's not uncommon. Pica behavior is not uncommon. In fact, you've probably seen some of that locally through the El Paso Center. And it's a kind of a personal thing, because what the mother had to admit was that she poisoned her child. And that's a very personal thing to have to delete with. But I think, yes, Jeff Levine is on the line. Good. Pica can occur in adults. Yes, it can.
Well, thank you again, Dr. Larry Lowry. It's always wonderful having you, and I am excited for your retirement activities. I hope you continue to have a wonderful time, and I hope that you continue to accept our invitations to come back and share your knowledge with us in the future. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, and thank you to all who have joined us. We'll
Okay.
see you next month. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.